사실 오페라 요령이 단일 공연을 하기가 어려운 이유는 한 시즌을 준비하기 위해서는 보통 인터내셔널 투어라고 해서 5년, 10년을 보고 이 한 프로덕션을 준비하는 게 보통이다 보니 이 한 시즌을 위해서 이 모든 전 세계 스텝이 참여하기에는 제작비나 이런 일정도 그렇고 너무 어려운 그렇기 때문에 사실은 엄두를 낼 수 없는 그런 프로덕션이었는데 사실 한국 공연이 이렇게 좀 짧은 기간 동안에 할 수 있었던 거는 원 제작사의 알류지의 결정도 있었지만 한국 공연에 대한 위상이 그만큼 높아졌다는 것을 반증하는 부분이기도 하여서 굉장히 고무적이라고 생각을 하고요. 사실 가장 공들여서 생각하고 있는 지점은 오리지널 크리에이터가 만들어 놓은 본연의 공연 자체를 보여줄 수 있을까에 가장 초점을 두고 저희 공연을 거의 30년 함께 해온 장인들과 함께 작품을 만들어가고 있습니다.
There's not one single performing arts background that you require to be able to qualify to be in Phantom. When we auditioned, when we go through a casting process for this show, we have a very open mind to who walks into the room, because we don't categorize people by what sort of background they have. We categorize, or we work with them, and we find traits in their personalities, traits in in who they are, that resonate with what we feel is important for those roles. So Phantom requires a person with who's very charismatic, who has a sense of command about him, and Christine, for example, needs a great capacity for compassion and empathy and all of that. So we look at all of that, and we take each performer who walks into the room individually and work with them and discover who they are, and that's how we cast the show. We don't really have sort of clear categories. Obviously there are basic skills you need to bring to it, but in terms of finding those personalities and finding the characters, it's much more interesting to keep an open mind and find out together with these people, but how and where they fit in.
What makes Phantom so difficult to cast is that it's not just your regular musical theater. It requires, as he said, a classical background, both in singing and in dancing. And sometimes that's very difficult to find someone who has the sensibility to be able to tell a story and use the technique that they have learned to do that. That's not an easy find anywhere we've ever gone in the world. Secondly, I would say what complicated this process is that we did it all digitally. We did it all online. And usually we have the benefit of having the people in the room, so we get a much better sense of who the actual person is, and we can also put them together in the room to know what their dynamics are. So it's been a very curious and fulfilling rehearsal process to find those dynamics that we usually know a bit better when we get to do this more in person.
We have three very different Phantoms, very individual. We have Song-woo Cho, who comes from a really incredibly strong acting background, and we have Dong-seok, who is a sort of almost a musical theater all-rounder, and we have Julian, who comes from a classical background. So really, three very different Phantoms covering all the different performing arts backgrounds, and so that's very exciting. We have our two Christines who both have classical background, but who we worked with online and found that they had an incredible warmth and vulnerability about them, and we've found over the course of rehearsals that is something that they bring to their performances, and they're both incredibly moving performances. And then of course our two Raouls, who are very different from one another, very different personalities, and it was a great journey to discover the kind of roles that they would be. So what I would say to you, if you really want to cover and see all the work that we did and all the differences in the production, you should come and see it 7 times. 3 Phantoms, 2 Raoul's and 2 Christines. Come see it 7 times.
저희가 정말 황금 조연 라인들을 꼭 좀 한번 봐주셨으면 좋겠는 게 저희 오페라 유령이 워낙에 역사가 오래되다 보니 한 개개인에게도 오페라 유령과 관련된 역사를 갖고 계신 분들이 많이 계세요. 그래서 저희 요번에 앙드레 역을 맡은 윤영석 배우님은 2001년, 2009년도에 유령 역을 하셨다가 이제는 이제 3번째 친정으로 돌아와서 다시 이제 앙드레 역을 맡으신 윤영석 배우님이 계시고 이상준 배우님은 또 2009년도에 전회 공연을 하면서 가장 많은 오페라 유령 공연을 했던 배우분이신데 이제 피르맹 역을 맡으시게 됐고요. 저희 마담지리 역을 맡은 김하선 배우 같은 경우는 요번에 저희 회식하면서 사진 하나를 보여주는데 2001년도에 본인이 막내면서 마담지리로 한번 커버여서 섰던 그 사진을 아직도 갖고 있더라고요. 그래서 그걸 보여주면서 정말 세월이 이렇게 지났구나라고 하면서 정말 이 역사와 전통을 갖고 있는 그 배우분들이 참여해 주심으로 해서 훨씬 더 작품에 깊이를 더해 주지 않을까 생각합니다. 이번 프로덕션의 가장 주요한 포인트는 오리지널리티를 복원시키는 거다 보니 실제 원래 오리지널 디자인을 그대로 재현해보는 과정이 필요했고요. 그래서 현재 투어 중인 세트가 아닌 새로운 한국 공연을 위한 세트를 영국에서 새로 제작을 해서 거기서 똑같은 컨디션으로 공연장에서 한번 세워보는 과정을 하면서 완벽하게 세트를 준비하는 과정이 있었고요. 한국어 공연을 준비하면서 가장 신경 쓰는 부분 중에 하나가 또 이제 한국어 가사일 텐데요. 워낙에 또 이 공연 자체가 오페레타다 보니까 모든 가사로만 이루어져 있는 공연입니다. 그래서 노랫말이 다 가사고 그게 스토리텔링이 다 전달이 돼야 되는데 사실 저희가 2001년도에 할 때와 2009년도에 할 때는 원 크리에이터들과의 그 소통에 있어서 저희의 모든 의견이 다 반영될 수 없는 그런 지점들이 좀 있었어요. 특히 이번 같은 경우에는 한국의 배우의 특성에 맞게 또 한국 문화를 훨씬 더 정서를 많이 반영을 해서 저희가 할 수 있는 그 가사를 배우들이 연기하기 편한 방식으로 노래하기 편한 방식으로 조금씩 많이 좀 유연하게 해주셔서 저희가 볼 때는 굉장히 많이 바뀐 것처럼 느껴지거든요. 근데 사실 저희는 너무 매일 보니까 아마 예전에 2009년도에 공연을 보신 분들도 이 부분은 많이 바뀌었네라고 느끼실 수 있을 정도의 변화는 있을 것 같습니다. 근데 훨씬 더 듣기 편하고 이해하기 쉽게 한국어 가사를 좀 변형했다는 말씀을 드립니다.
Tiring. But no, seriously, it's it creates some logistical problems sometimes, and we have to think about all that. And we actually added a little bit of rehearsal time at the beginning of the rehearsal period, during which we worked just with the Phantom, Christine, and Raoul's. Just to get a head start on on things before the rest of the ensemble and the rest of the company joined us. And I was very apprehensive actually initially about just the workload and how do we do this logistically and all of that. But I found that I found it much easier than I had feared, because mostly because the 3 Phantoms, 2 Raoul's, 2 Christines, they are incredibly supportive of each other, and they are very patient with each other in rehearsal. So we would most of the time really have everybody in the room. There's also something about the story which I think in a very universal way resonates with audiences all over the world. I think there's a depth of emotion with this show and between the characters that I think resonates with emotions of people with deep emotions, and awakens those emotions as people watch the show. And I think that is also a very big factor, and I think why this show has been so successful and continues to be. I mean, we're in Korea now for the 3rd time for the 3rd Korean language production. That's unheard of. No other country has had that.
This story is timeless, and it is universal. Who among us has not fallen passionately in love? And who among us has oftentimes, or at least worried about, being rejected? So love, rejection, the deepest, most universal of emotions we deal with in this production, and it transcends cultures. That's why it can play all over the world, and it transcends generations.
This is our third local language production of Phantom here in Korea. 2001 was the first. There was a musical theater. The industry, it was very small. Phantom came to Korea in 2001 and triggered an incredible and unique music theater boom like I have never seen or heard about in any other country, really. And that is very exciting, and it makes us very proud that Phantom would have done that. And last time I was here 3 years ago, and I was talking to you at a media event like this. I said, Korean people have an ongoing love affair with Phantom of the Opera. Today, I would say Korean people are now in a marriage with Phantom, and every once in a while they have an affair with a different musical, but then they always come back to Phantom.